August 1944, somewhere near the Falaise Gap, a column of American M3 half-tracks rolled through the scorched French countryside, engines roaring as their tracks chewed through the mud and debris of retreating German formations. Inside one vehicle, Sergeant Thomas Becker gripped the dashboard as his driver pushed the half-track to 45 miles per hour across terrain that would have stopped most wheeled vehicles cold. They were keeping pace with Sherman tanks. More importantly, they were outrunning every German half-track that tried to shadow their advance. For the German observers watching from defensive positions, the sight violated everything they thought they knew about mechanized warfare. American half-tracks moved with a speed and agility that seemed impossible. They traversed muddy fields that German SdKfz 251s struggled through. They powered over obstacles with ease, their front-wheel drive pulling them through terrain where German half-tracks became mired, and they did it with a mechanical simplicity that allowed rapid field repairs, while German vehicles sat disabled, awaiting specialized parts that would never arrive. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. This was the weapon German generals had dismissed as crude American engineering, a vehicle they laughed at during intelligence briefings, certain their own sophisticated SdKfz series represented technical superiority. What they discovered instead was that American pragmatism had created a half-track that redefined infantry mobility in modern warfare. The story of the M3 half-track is not about technological brilliance. It's about American industrial philosophy meeting the brutal realities of mechanized combat. It's about choosing reliability over sophistication, mass production over perfection, and practical engineering over elegant design. And it's about how these choices created a vehicle that could outrun, outlast, and ultimately overwhelm the German war machine. Between 1939 and 1945, the United States produced over 41,000 half-tracks of all types. This number exceeded German half-track production by nearly 3 to 1. More importantly, American half-tracks remained operational far longer than their German counterparts, maintained by mechanics who didn't need specialized training to keep them running. The German Wehrmacht entered World War II believing they understood mechanized infantry warfare better than anyone. They had pioneered the concept of Panzer grenadiers, mechanized infantry designed to accompany tank formations and exploit breakthroughs. Their SdKfz 251 half-tracks represented what they considered the pinnacle of this doctrine. German military planners viewed the half-track as essential to blitzkrieg tactics. These vehicles would carry infantry forward at the same pace as Panzer divisions, allowing rapid exploitation of armored breakthroughs. The theory was sound. The execution proved problematic. German half-track development began in the early 1930s, evolving from earlier experiments with tracked vehicles. The SdKfz 251, standardized in 1939, became the most numerous German half-track. It featured sophisticated engineering, including a complex steering system that used both front wheels and track braking for turns. The suspension system employed overlapping and interleaved road wheels, a design that reduced ground pressure and improved traction. On paper, these features represented technical advancement. In practice, they created maintenance nightmares. The SdKfz 251 weighed approximately 8 tons and measured just over 19 feet in length. It could transport 10 soldiers plus a 2-man crew. Armor thickness ranged from 8 mm on the sides to 14.5 mm on the front. This provided protection against rifle fire and shell fragments, though not against dedicated anti-tank weapons. The vehicle was powered by a Maybach HL gasoline engine producing 100 horsepower. Maximum speed on roads reached 33 miles per hour. Range extended to approximately 186 miles under ideal conditions. These specifications seemed adequate for the vehicle's intended role. German commanders anticipated that superior engineering would compensate for any numerical disadvantages. They assumed their half-tracks would outperform anything the Allies might field. This assumption proved catastrophically wrong. The problems with German half-track design became apparent during the first major campaigns. The interleaved road wheels that provided excellent ground pressure also accumulated mud and debris between the wheels. In Russian winters, this mud froze solid, completely immobilizing vehicles. Crews spent hours with blowtorches attempting to free frozen running gear. The sophisticated steering system required constant maintenance and adjustment. The complex transmission demanded specialized knowledge to repair. Most critically, the Maybach engine proved underpowered for the vehicle's weight, particularly when towing equipment or operating in difficult terrain. Production presented another challenge. The SdKfz 251 required approximately 3,500 man-hours to manufacture. Complex armor welding, precision-machined components, and hand-fitted assemblies meant production rates remained relatively low. By September 1939, only the 1st Panzer Division had partially equipped its infantry with half-tracks. Multiple manufacturers produced variants, but coordination problems and resource shortages limited output. Total production of all SdKfz 251 variants reached approximately 15,252 vehicles between 1939 and 1945. This represented impressive engineering achievement but inadequate industrial capacity for total war. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, American military planners watched German blitzkrieg tactics with growing concern. The rapid conquest of Poland and France demonstrated that mechanized warfare required rethinking traditional infantry mobility. The United States Army Ordnance Department had been experimenting with half-track designs since the early 1930s. They had tested French Citroën Quegresser vehicles, evaluating the half-track concept for American needs. The goal was clear: develop a vehicle that could transport infantry across difficult terrain while providing some protection from small arms fire. What distinguished the American approach was philosophical rather than technical. German engineers sought optimal performance through sophisticated design. American engineers sought adequate performance through simple, reliable design that could be mass-produced using existing industrial capacity. The White Motor Company developed a prototype by combining a commercial truck chassis with a tracked rear suspension. The design deliberately used as many standard automotive components as possible. The goal was not technical elegance, but rapid production and easy maintenance. The resulting M3 half-track, standardized in May 1941, embodied this pragmatic philosophy. It measured just over 20 feet long, 7 feet wide, and weighed approximately 9 tons fully loaded. The vehicle could transport 13 men, 3 in the cab, 10 in the rear compartment. Power came from a White 160 AX 6-cylinder gasoline engine producing 148 horsepower. This provided noticeably better power-to-weight ratio than German half-tracks. The engine was a modified commercial truck motor, available from multiple manufacturers and serviceable by any trained mechanic. The transmission was a 4-speed manual gearbox, again adapted from commercial truck designs. The front axle was powered, giving the M3 4-wheel drive capability that German half-tracks lacked. This powered front axle proved crucial for mobility in difficult terrain. The suspension system was remarkably simple compared to German designs. The front used standard truck leaf springs. The rear tracks ran on vertical volute springs. There were no interleaved wheels to trap mud. The design prioritized ease of maintenance over theoretical performance optimization. Maximum speed reached 45 miles per hour on roads. Range extended to approximately 220 miles. Armor thickness ranged from 6 mm to 12 mm, comparable to German protection levels but easier to manufacture. Most significantly, the M3 required approximately 1,000 man-hours to manufacture. This represented less than 1/3 the production time of German half-tracks. The difference came from standardized components, simplified assembly, and designs that accommodated existing industrial capabilities. 3 manufacturers produced the M3: White Motor Company, Autocar Company, and Diamond T Motor Company. International Harvester produced a variant designated M5 for Lend-Lease to Allied nations. All used identical specifications, ensuring complete parts interchangeability. Production began in 1941 and accelerated rapidly. By the time American forces entered combat in North Africa during Operation Torch in November 1942, thousands of M3 half-tracks were in service. The British received M3 half-tracks through Lend-Lease and deployed them with the 8th Army in North Africa. British soldiers, initially skeptical of American equipment, found the half-tracks reliable and capable. They particularly appreciated the powered front axle, which gave superior mobility compared to German vehicles they encountered. Soviet forces received approximately 3 M3S and over 800 M5 variants through Lend-Lease. Soviet commanders valued the vehicle's simplicity and reliability in extreme weather conditions that disabled more complex German designs. The Free French received approximately 1,475 M3 half-tracks, equipping their reconstituted armoured divisions. These vehicles served throughout the liberation of France and the final campaigns in Germany. But the real test would come when American forces met German Panzer Grenadier units in direct combat. That's when the theoretical superiority of German engineering would collide with the practical advantages of American design philosophy. When American troops first encountered German half-tracks in Tunisia during early 1943, German officers expressed confident dismissal of American equipment. Intelligence reports described the M3 as primitive compared to the SdKfz 251. The boxy shape seemed unsophisticated. The simple suspension appeared crude. The reliance on standard automotive components suggested inferior engineering. German tankers and Panzer Grenadiers who inspected captured American half-tracks reinforced these assessments. They noted the thin armor. They observed the open top that provided minimal protection. They examined the straightforward mechanical systems and concluded American vehicles represented quantity over quality. This assessment would prove one of the war's most consequential miscalculations. The first major engagement between American and German mechanized infantry occurred during the Tunisia campaign. German Panzer Grenadier units, supported by SdKfz 251 half-tracks, launched counterattacks against American positions near Kasserine Pass in February 1943. The battle exposed fundamental differences between American and German operational realities. German half-tracks advanced across the broken terrain of central Tunisia, but their complex running gear began accumulating debris. The interleaved wheels that provided excellent flotation also trapped mud and rocks, reducing mobility. Crews had to halt repeatedly to clear obstructions. American M3 half-tracks, with their simpler track design and powered front wheels, maintained higher sustained speeds. When German vehicles bogged down in muddy sections, American half-tracks powered through using their front-wheel drive. The difference seemed minor in individual instances, but cumulative effect proved decisive in sustained operations. More significantly, when American half-tracks suffered mechanical failures, crews could often perform field repairs using basic tools. The M3's reliance on standard automotive components meant spare parts were readily available. Any mechanic familiar with commercial trucks could service the engine, transmission, or running gear. German half-tracks required specialized parts that often weren't available. The complex Maybach engines demanded trained technicians. The sophisticated steering systems needed precision adjustment. When SdKfz 251s broke down far from proper maintenance facilities, they frequently remained disabled for weeks, awaiting parts or qualified mechanics. American observers noted these differences with growing appreciation. The M3 might not represent elegant engineering, but it worked. It kept moving when German vehicles stopped. It stayed operational when more sophisticated designs failed. By May 1943, when Axis forces in North Africa surrendered, American forces had captured numerous German half-tracks. Technical intelligence teams examined these vehicles in detail, comparing them with American designs. The reports noted German technical sophistication but questioned its practical value. One assessment observed that German half-tracks embodied excellent theoretical design compromised by manufacturing complexity and maintenance demands unsuitable for sustained combat operations. Another report noted, bluntly, the enemy half-track represents superior peacetime engineering. The M3 represents superior wartime engineering. there is a difference. This difference would become even more apparent during the Italian campaign and ultimately during the liberation of France. The Sicily invasion in July 1943 and the subsequent Italian campaign provided extensive combat testing for American half-tracks. The mountainous terrain, poor roads, and limited infrastructure created demanding conditions for all mechanized vehicles. German Panzer Grenadier units defending Italy employed their half-tracks in prepared positions, using the vehicles primarily as mobile strongpoints rather than offensive transport. This tactical adaptation reflected growing awareness that German half-tracks couldn't match American mobility in sustained operations. American forces used their M3 half-tracks aggressively, transporting infantry forward during attacks and rapidly repositioning to exploit successes. The vehicle's reliability allowed commanders to plan operations, assuming mechanized infantry would arrive on schedule. German commanders couldn't make similar assumptions about their own half-tracks. Maintenance statistics told the story. American armored divisions reported M3 half-tracks averaged approximately 30 days between major mechanical failures, requiring depot-level repairs. German SdKfz 251s averaged approximately 15 days. This meant American half-tracks spent roughly twice as much time operationally available. The difference compounded over months of campaigning. An American half-track that entered service in November 1943 might still be operational in June 1944. A German half-track that entered service at the same time likely required multiple trips to repair facilities, spending weeks disabled awaiting parts. But the real test would come in Normandy, where American half-tracks would demonstrate capabilities that German planners never anticipated possible from what they considered crude American engineering. The Normandy landings on June 6, 1944, brought American half-tracks to northwest Europe in unprecedented numbers. Each armored division included approximately 433 M2 or M3 half-tracks, distributed between armored regiments and armored infantry regiments. Additional half-tracks served in independent tank battalions, cavalry reconnaissance squadrons, and various support units. Within weeks of D-Day, thousands of American half-tracks were operating in France. They transported infantry across the difficult Norman bocage country, powered through muddy fields that wheeled vehicles couldn't traverse, and maintained pace with Sherman tanks during offensive operations. German defenders, many veterans of the Eastern Front, were familiar with American equipment. They had fought American forces in Tunisia and Italy. They believed they understood American capabilities and limitations. What they encountered in Normandy shattered those assumptions. The American breakout from the Normandy beachhead during Operation Cobra in late July 1944 created conditions perfectly suited to American half-track advantages. General Omar Bradley's First Army punched through German defensive lines west of Saint-Lô, creating opportunities for rapid exploitation. General George Patton's Third Army became operational on August 1st and immediately began the pursuit across France. Armored divisions spearheaded the advance, with mechanized infantry in half-tracks following closely behind tanks. The pace of advance exceeded anything German commanders thought possible for sustained operations. Patton's forces advanced 50 to 75 miles per week, sometimes covering 80 miles in a single week during peak operations. This operational tempo required half-tracks to operate continuously, day and night, across hundreds of miles of French countryside. Vehicles broke down, but American maintenance systems rapidly repaired or replaced them. The advance never stopped for want of operational half-tracks. German Panzer Grenadier units, attempting to establish defensive lines, found themselves repeatedly outflanked by American mechanized forces that moved faster than German planning cycles could accommodate. By the time German units occupied positions, American half-tracks had already bypassed them and were continuing eastward. This mobility advantage became decisive during the Falaise pocket battles in August 1944. American and Canadian forces encircled retreating German armies, trapping thousands of troops and hundreds of vehicles. German half-tracks attempting to escape the pocket found themselves overtaken by faster American M3s supporting the encirclement. For German soldiers, watching American half-tracks pass their positions at speeds they thought impossible for tracked vehicles The experience was psychologically devastating. These weren't supposed to be superior vehicles. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. American half-tracks were supposed to be crude, unsophisticated designs that German engineering had surpassed. Instead, they were faster, more reliable, and far more numerous than anything Germany could field. One German Panzer grenadier, captured during the Falaise battles, later recalled his shock at seeing American half-track columns. "We had been told the Americans relied on quantity over quality. We believed our vehicles were better engineered. Then we watched their half-tracks move past at 45 miles per hour across terrain, where our vehicles could barely maintain 25. We realized we had been lied to, or perhaps our leaders had lied to themselves." This realization spread through German ranks as the campaign progressed. American half-tracks weren't just numerous, they were operationally superior in the ways that mattered most in sustained combat. The difference wasn't just about speed or mobility, it was about what those capabilities represented. American half-tracks embodied an industrial philosophy that German planners fundamentally misunderstood. They had assumed that superior German engineering would compensate for numerical disadvantages. They believed their complex, sophisticated designs represented technological advancement that Americans couldn't match. What they failed to grasp was that American engineers had designed for different priorities. Reliability mattered more than sophistication. Production speed mattered more than theoretical performance optimization. Field maintenance mattered more than precision engineering. These weren't compromises. They were deliberate choices based on understanding what modern mechanized warfare actually required. The material differences between the two vehicles illustrated competing philosophies perfectly. Consider the engines. The German Maybach HL-42, powering the SdKfz 251, was a purpose-built military engine featuring precision-machined components and sophisticated engineering. It produced 100 horsepower from a 6-cylinder gasoline design. On paper, this seemed adequate for the vehicle's 8-ton weight. In practice, the Maybach required constant maintenance. Valve adjustments demanded specialized tools and trained mechanics. The carburetor system, optimized for performance, proved temperamental in extreme weather. Cold starts in winter conditions, often failed entirely without extensive preparation. The cooling system, designed for European climates, struggled in North African heat. More critically, when the Maybach failed, repairs required parts manufactured specifically for this engine. No civilian equivalent existed. No commercial suppliers produced compatible components. Broken German half-tracks awaited Maybach parts that might take weeks to arrive, if they arrived at all. The American White 160AX engine represented a completely different approach. This was a modified commercial truck engine, already in production for civilian vehicles. It produced 148 horsepower from 6 cylinders, giving the M3 superior power-to-weight ratio despite similar displacement. But the real advantage wasn't horsepower, it was availability. The White engine used standard automotive parts. Spark plugs, distributor caps, fuel pumps, and other components could be sourced from multiple suppliers. Any mechanic familiar with truck engines could perform basic maintenance. The design prioritized reliability over refinement, using robust components that tolerated abuse. When an M3's engine failed, replacement parts came from supply depots stocked with commercial automotive components. Repairs took hours instead of weeks. The vehicle returned to service quickly. This operational availability multiplied the effectiveness of American mechanized forces beyond what production numbers alone suggested. The suspension systems revealed similar philosophical differences. German engineers had designed the SdKfz 251's interleaved and overlapping road wheels to distribute weight evenly, reducing ground pressure. This sophisticated system worked beautifully on hard surfaces and in ideal conditions. The vehicle could traverse terrain that would bog down simpler designs. But the interleaved wheels created a maintenance nightmare. Each road wheel required individual mounting and alignment. Replacing a damaged inner wheel meant removing multiple outer wheels first. The complex arrangement accumulated debris between wheels, requiring frequent cleaning. In muddy conditions, the spaces between wheels filled with dirt that hardened as it dried, requiring manual clearing. Winter conditions proved catastrophic. Mud accumulated between the interleaved wheels would freeze solid overnight. Crews awakened to find their vehicles completely immobilized, unable to turn the tracks. They spent hours with blowtorches and crowbars attempting to free the running gear. Sometimes they succeeded, often they didn't. The M3's suspension represented pragmatic simplicity. The front wheels used standard truck leaf springs. The rear tracks ran on vertical volute springs, a proven design borrowed from agricultural equipment. The road wheels were individually mounted with space between them. Debris didn't accumulate. Mud fell away rather than packing solid. Frozen conditions rarely immobilized the vehicle completely. Replacing a damaged road wheel took minutes. The entire suspension could be serviced with basic hand tools. No specialized equipment was required. No advanced training was necessary. The design sacrificed theoretical performance optimization for practical maintainability. The steering systems embodied another fundamental difference. The SdKfz 251 used a complex arrangement combining front-wheel steering with track braking. For gentle turns, the front wheels alone provided direction. For sharper turns, the system engaged clutches and brakes on the inside track, forcing it to slow or stop while the outside track continued at full speed. This sophisticated system provided excellent maneuverability. The Halftrack could execute tight turns in confined spaces. The combination of wheel and track steering offered precise control. German engineers considered it a major advantage over simpler systems, but the complexity created constant maintenance demands. The steering clutches required periodic adjustment. The brake bands wore quickly under heavy use. The linkages connecting steering wheel to front wheels and tracks demanded precise alignment. Any play in the system affected steering response. Repairs required trained mechanics and specialized tools. The M3 used simpler steering. The front wheels turned conventionally, like any truck. Track steering was accomplished through a basic differential and brake system. Turn the wheel, the front tires turned. Apply brakes to one track through pedals, that track slowed. The system lacked sophistication but worked reliably. More importantly, the powered front axle meant the M3 could often maintain forward progress using front-wheel drive alone when tracks lost traction. This gave the vehicle mobility advantages the SdKfz 251 couldn't match. In mud, sand, or snow, the powered front wheels pulled the vehicle forward, even when tracks slipped. German Halftracks, lacking powered front wheels, became stuck when tracks lost traction. Without front-wheel drive to maintain forward momentum, they required external assistance or extensive recovery efforts. This mobility limitation created tactical vulnerabilities that American forces learned to exploit. The armor protection illustrated yet another design trade-off. German engineers had given the SdKfz 251 thicker armor, particularly on the front where 14.5 mm provided better protection against small arms fire. The angled side armor, 8 mm thick, was positioned to deflect bullets rather than absorb them directly. This heavier armor increased vehicle weight to approximately 8,500 kilograms. With only 100 horsepower available, the power-to-weight ratio suffered. The vehicle accelerated slowly. Top speed, while adequate on roads, couldn't be maintained on rough terrain. The suspension, already complex, bore additional stress from the extra weight. General Omar Bradley, in his post-war assessment of American equipment, described the M3 Halftrack as a competent and dependable contrivance whose bad reputation resulted from inexperienced troops who attempted to use it for too many things. This assessment captured both the vehicle's strengths and limitations. American soldiers initially hated the M3. They called it the Purple Heart Box, a grim reference to the decoration awarded for combat wounds. The nickname reflected legitimate concerns. The Halftrack's armor, ranging from 6 to 12 mm thick, provided protection against rifle fire and shell fragments, but nothing more substantial. The open top offered no protection from air-bursting artillery shells. Soldiers riding in the rear compartment felt exposed and vulnerable. These complaints were valid. The M3 wasn't designed to fight. It was designed to transport infantry to fighting positions while providing mobility and limited protection. Used correctly, as General Bradley noted, it performed admirably. Used as a substitute for tanks or assault vehicles, it suffered casualties. German Panzer Grenadiers, by contrast, had different expectations for their SdKfz 251s. German doctrine anticipated that half-tracks would operate closer to the front, sometimes engaging directly in combat. This required heavier armor and more substantial protection. The SdKfz 251's armor thickness, ranging from 8 to 14.5 millimeters, reflected these requirements. But heavier armor meant heavier weight. Heavier weight with the same horsepower meant lower power-to-weight ratio. Lower power-to-weight ratio meant reduced acceleration and sustained speed. The incremental armor advantage came at operational mobility cost. More significantly, the M3's unpowered front axle on German half-tracks created fundamental mobility limitations. When one track lost traction in mud or soft ground, the vehicle became stuck. The M3's powered front wheels allowed continued forward progress even when tracks lost traction. This seemingly minor difference proved decisive in countless tactical situations. The December 1944 Battle of the Bulge provided the ultimate test of both half-track designs under the worst possible conditions. Hitler's surprise offensive through the Ardennes created chaos among American forces and initially appeared to vindicate German faith in their military capabilities. German Panzer Grenadier units, supported by SdKfz 251s, advanced through the densely forested Ardennes region in freezing weather. The offensive achieved complete surprise on the morning of December 16th. Within 24 hours, German forces had penetrated deep into American lines, creating the bulge that gave the battle its name. For German commanders, this initial success seemed to prove that American mechanization wasn't invincible. Their half-tracks, despite mobility limitations, were advancing. American defenses were crumbling. The situation appeared to favor German tactics. But the appearance was deceptive. As American forces recovered from initial shock and began counterattacking, the mobility differential between American and German half-tracks became decisive. American mechanized infantry repositioned rapidly to threatened sectors. They evacuated wounded under fire. They brought ammunition forward to surrounded units. They maintained operational flexibility that German forces couldn't match. At Bastogne, where the 101st Airborne Division held against repeated German attacks, American half-tracks played crucial roles in sustaining the defense. They evacuated casualties. They redistributed ammunition between units. They maintained communications links. When General George Patton's Third Army broke through to relieve Bastogne on December 26th, his mechanized infantry arrived aboard M3 half-tracks that had covered over 100 miles in 48 hours across winter roads. German half-tracks attempting similar operational tempos broke down repeatedly. The complex interleaved wheels, superb in theory, clogged with frozen mud and ice. Crews spent hours clearing running gear. The sophisticated steering systems required constant adjustment in freezing conditions. Engines struggled to start in sub-zero temperatures. American M3 crews faced similar weather challenges, but the simpler mechanical systems proved more reliable. The white six-cylinder engines started more consistently. The basic suspension didn't accumulate frozen debris between components. The powered front axle pulled vehicles through ice and snow when tracks alone would have failed. By early January 1945, as Allied forces compressed the bulge and restored the front lines, the strategic failure of German planning was evident. The offensive had cost Germany approximately 100,000 casualties and irreplaceable equipment losses. Among these losses were hundreds of half-tracks destroyed or abandoned when mechanical failures left them unable to retreat. American forces, despite suffering over 80,000 casualties, retained operational capability. Their mechanized units, though battered, remained functional. The M3 half-tracks that had been cursed as Purple Heart boxes proved resilient enough to sustain intensive operations under the worst possible conditions. The contrast wasn't lost on German prisoners interrogated after the battle. Many expressed shock at American logistics and mobility. One Panzer grenadier officer stated that his unit's half-tracks had suffered more breakdowns during the Bulge offensive than during the entire previous year of fighting. Another noted that American mechanized infantry seemed able to appear anywhere, at any time, while German forces struggled to maintain even basic mobility. This pattern repeated as Allied forces advanced into Germany during early 1945. American mechanized divisions crossed the Rhine River and drove deep into the German heartland. Their M3 half-tracks maintained the pace of advance, delivering infantry to objectives, evacuating casualties, and sustaining operations without the constant mechanical failures that plagued German equivalents. German forces, by contrast, faced catastrophic mobility problems. Fuel shortages immobilized many vehicles. Parts shortages left broken half-tracks unrepairable. The surviving SdKfz 251s struggled to maintain even defensive operations as Allied forces advanced. By April 1945, Wehrmacht units defending against Allied advances had almost no operational half-tracks remaining. Those few still running were maintained through cannibalization, stripping parts from disabled vehicles to keep others operational. The sophisticated engineering that German planners had considered superior had become a fatal liability when spare parts and qualified mechanics weren't available. American forces, conversely, operated thousands of half-tracks across multiple fronts. Production had ended in 1944, but the vehicles built remained operational through the war's conclusion. Simple maintenance kept them running. Available spare parts kept them repairable. The design philosophy that German engineers had dismissed as crude proved devastatingly effective. The final irony came during the occupation of Germany after surrender. American M3 half-tracks patrolled German cities and controlled occupation zones. German civilians, who had watched newsreels showing their superior SdKfz 251s, now saw American half-tracks functioning perfectly while German vehicles sat abandoned throughout the countryside. Some Germans salvaged abandoned American half-tracks and put them back into service. They discovered what American mechanics had known all along. These vehicles were easy to maintain, reliable to operate, and nearly indestructible under reasonable conditions. The simplicity that German engineers had mocked represented genuine genius in industrial design. Post-war analysis revealed the full extent of half-track production and operational statistics. Germany had produced approximately 15,252 SdKfz 251 half-tracks between 1939 and 1945. The United States produced over 41,000 M2, M3, and variant half-tracks during the same period. This production ratio, nearly 3-to-1 in American favor, represented only part of the story. Operational availability told the rest. German half-tracks spent approximately half their service lives undergoing repairs or awaiting parts. American half-tracks remained operationally available approximately 2/3 of their service lives. These statistics meant that at any given moment, American forces had roughly 4 times as many operational half-tracks as German forces, despite the 3-to-1 production advantage. The reliability differential multiplied the numerical advantage into overwhelming operational superiority. The lesson wasn't lost on post-war military planners. Soviet forces, who had received M5 half-tracks through Lend-Lease, noted their superior performance compared to captured German vehicles. Post-war Soviet armored personnel carrier designs incorporated American reliability principles rather than German sophistication. British forces, who had operated both American M3S and captured German SdKfz 251s, concluded that American designs better suited sustained combat operations. British post-war APC development emphasized mechanical simplicity and ease of maintenance over theoretical performance optimization. Even the French, who had received 1,475 M3 half-tracks and operated them extensively during the liberation campaigns, recognized that American design philosophy represented the future of mechanized warfare. French post-war vehicle development incorporated lessons learned from American half-track experience. German engineers, many of whom continued working on military vehicle designs in post-war Europe, gradually acknowledged that their wartime designs had prioritized wrong qualities Sophistication without reliability meant nothing. Theoretical performance without practical maintainability served no purpose. Elegant engineering that required specialized maintenance created operational vulnerabilities. The American M3 Halftrack remained in service long after World War II ended. The United States retained them through the Korean War, where they again demonstrated reliability under demanding conditions. The M16 multiple-gun motor carriage variant, mounting 4 half-inch machine guns for anti-aircraft defense, proved so valuable that additional vehicles were converted from standard M3 personnel carriers to meet Korean War demand. Israel received large numbers of surplus American half-tracks and operated them into the 1980s, constantly modifying and upgrading the basic chassis. The vehicle's simple mechanical systems allowed easy adaptation to changing requirements. Israeli engineers developed dozens of variants for roles ranging from mortar carriers to command vehicles. Other nations, including Argentina, Chile, Mexico, and various Latin American countries, operated American half-tracks for decades. The vehicle's combination of reliability, simplicity, and adaptability suited requirements for nations without sophisticated maintenance infrastructure. Some American half-tracks remained in service through the 1990s in smaller military forces, over 50 years after their initial production. Few other World War II vehicles achieved such operational longevity. The SdKfz 251, by contrast, largely disappeared after Germany's surrender. Some vehicles served briefly with occupation forces or European militaries, but maintenance difficulties and parts shortages ended their operational lives within years. The complex engineering that had seemed so impressive in 1939 proved impractical for post-war operations. Czechoslovakia produced a post-war variant designated OT-810, using captured German manufacturing equipment, but replacing the problematic Maybach engine with a more reliable Tatra diesel. These modifications acknowledged that the original German design required fundamental changes to achieve reliability. The story of American and German half-tracks represents more than just vehicle comparison. It illustrates fundamental differences in how nations approached industrial warfare. Germany sought perfection through engineering sophistication. America sought adequacy through industrial pragmatism. German planners believed superior quality could overcome numerical disadvantages. They designed vehicles that theoretically outperformed enemy equivalents. They prioritized engineering elegance and technical advancement. American planners understood that wars were won through sustained operational capability. They designed vehicles that worked reliably under combat conditions. They prioritized production speed and maintenance simplicity. The results spoke for themselves. German forces operated sophisticated equipment that frequently didn't work when needed. American forces operated simpler equipment that consistently performed as required. This pattern extended beyond half-tracks. German Tiger tanks represented engineering marvels that frequently broke down. American Sherman tanks represented adequate designs that remained operational. German aircraft featured sophisticated systems that required extensive maintenance. American aircraft used simpler systems that stayed airworthy longer. In every case, the underlying philosophy differed. German engineers designed for theoretical superiority. American engineers designed for practical utility. In the context of total war, practical utility proved decisive. The German generals who laughed at American half-tracks in intelligence briefings learned this lesson painfully. Their sophisticated SdKfz 251s couldn't maintain operational tempo against simpler M3s. Their complex engineering became liability rather than asset. Their assumptions about technological superiority proved catastrophically wrong. By war's end, those same generals acknowledged that American industrial philosophy had proven superior, not because American engineers were more skilled, but because American priorities aligned better with modern warfare's requirements. General Heinz Guderian, one of Germany's foremost armored warfare theorists, later admitted that German forces had been overwhelmed not primarily by Allied tactical or strategic brilliance, but by sheer industrial capacity and equipment reliability. He noted specifically that American mechanized forces maintained operational tempos. German units simply couldn't match. This assessment captured the essential truth. The M3 Halftrack wasn't individually superior to the SdKfz 251 in every measurable way, but it was superior in the ways that mattered most for sustained combat operations. It was more reliable, it was easier to maintain, it remained operational longer, it could be produced faster and in greater quantities. These advantages, cumulative over months and years of warfare, proved decisive. The Americans had outrun every Panzer division, not because their half-tracks were faster in short sprints, but because they maintained speed over hundreds of miles without breaking down. They had overwhelmed German defences not through superior tactics alone, but through ability to sustain operations that German logistics couldn't match. The lesson echoes across military history. Sophistication without reliability means nothing. Theoretical superiority without practical utility serves no purpose. Elegant engineering that can't be maintained in field conditions creates vulnerability rather than strength. American half-tracks, dismissed as crude by German observers, embodied these principles perfectly. They weren't perfect vehicles. They were adequate vehicles that worked when needed, could be maintained by ordinary mechanics, and remained operational under demanding conditions. That adequacy, multiplied across 41,000 vehicles and sustained through years of combat, proved more valuable than any amount of sophisticated German engineering. The German generals learned this lesson too late. Their laughter at American half-tracks echoed hollow as they watched M3s roll past disabled German vehicles. Their confidence in technical superiority shattered against the reality of American industrial capacity and design philosophy. In the end, the Americans hadn't just built more half-tracks, they'd built better half-tracks for the conditions that mattered. And they'd proven that in modern warfare, quantity plus reliability equals quality. The M3 half-track stands as monument to this truth. Not elegant, not sophisticated, not theoretically optimal, just adequate, reliable, and available when needed. In war, those qualities proved decisive. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.